For my psychological test, I did the MMPI 2, which is the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 2. So it's the revised edition. This is a true-false self-reporting questionnaire that has 567 items on it. It is used to determine normal from abnormal population. So it's used to determine whether or not people endorse deviant or behavior that indicates they have a psychological condition such as depression, schizophrenia. And what I did actually in my paper, I used data from two different studies, a study from 1993 and a study from 1997 that actually use the faking and validity scales that are part of the test. And so we have 4 different scales that are used for determining whether or not people are actually suffering from psychological condition or whether they have been coached to report behaviors and responses that indicate they have a particular disorder. So the 1993 study actually used people who have not had any kind of psychological training, just volunteers for this study that took the test and faked responses that would indicate they had schizophrenia. So they were trying to feign the condition of schizophrenia. The actual 97 study used psychological students some were coached to endorse certain items that would indicate they had schizophrenia. And so the different scales show whether or not they were coached to respond to certain things, or whether the K correction actually caught them endorsing items that people that had actual schizophrenia would not endorse. So that was a really interesting way to look at the data. It's useful. This test is useful on adults. They have to have at least an 8th grade education level to take the test. It can be given on a computer or it can be given by hand, and it's often used to determine several different kinds of psychological conditions. And it was really interesting looking at the way the validity scales can determine whether people are faking their responses to either look good or look bad. They can determine whether they're lying about things because it has items that check the other items. So if you respond one way to one item, typically you will respond this way if you actually have the condition. So it was really interesting research to learn about this test. I thought that it was really interesting that for the 1997 study, they used psych students and gave them different options of endorsing different articles in certain ways to try to influence the test to actually test the validity scales. That's the MMPI 2.